When I asked if I could be in my daughter's wedding photos, I heard her soon-to-be mother-in-law whisper to her, "She ruined everything with that old face." The words struck me like broken glass against my skin, jagged and cutting deep. That old face. My throat closed as I stood frozen in the bridal shop, pretending I hadn't heard while every cell in my body burned with humiliation. That old face. 53 years of living etched into my features, apparently an eyesore too offensive for wedding album perfection. My daughter Emma looked away, her silence answering louder than any defense could have. I watched her shoulders tense, her eyes flicker between us, and then nothing. Not one word as Regina, her future mother-in-law, continued flipping through bridal magazines, discussing the importance of aesthetic coherence in wedding photography. The boutique suddenly felt airless, the delicate champagne flute in my hand dangerously close to shattering in my trembling grip. I had taken a day off work, driven 90 minutes to this exclusive Boston bridal salon, brought Emma's favorite macarons from that little bakery she loved since childhood, only to discover I was the blemish threatening to mar her perfect day. "Mom, maybe you could help coordinate things behind the scenes instead," Emma suggested softly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Regina has this vision, and she's paying for the photographer, so ... double quotes. Her voice trailed off as my heart crumbled. The air conditioning vent above blasted frigid air that seemed to penetrate straight to my bones. That old face. I nodded mechanically, my lips stretched in what I hoped resembled a smile while I mentally calculated the 28 years of bedtime stories. School lunches, doctor visits, graduation ceremonies, the $247,000 in college tuition I'd scraped together after her father left, all apparently worth less than Regina's aesthetic vision. "Of course, sweetie, whatever makes your day special," I managed to say, the taste of betrayal metallic on my tongue. I excused myself to the restroom where I leaned against the marble counter, counting breaths until the burning behind my eyes subsided. The mirror reflected a stranger. A woman with crow's feet and silver strands that apparently made her unworthy of standing beside her own daughter. For the first time, I saw myself through Regina's eyes, through society's eyes, and wondered when exactly I had crossed the invisible line from woman to obsolete. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, the silence of my empty nest home pressing against my eardrums. The wedding invitation mocked me from the refrigerator, its gold-embossed lettering sparkling under the track lighting. I had always prided myself on being reasonable, understanding, the cool parent who didn't make waves, but something shifted inside me that night as I sipped wine from the Waterford crystal I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to arrive. For 29 years I'd worked at New England Trust Bank, rising from teller to branch operations manager. I'd raised Emma alone after Mark left for his administrative assistant when Emma was 7. I'd stretched dollars, postponed dreams, maintained the image of composed self-sufficiency. I opened my laptop and stared at the reflection in its dark screen before powering it on. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as an unfamiliar thought formed. What if I stopped accepting invisibility as my fate? The next morning, I arrived at the bank 15 minutes early as usual, arranged the day's reports, and powered up the systems before other employees arrived. For 10,947 days I'd performed this ritual, becoming as much a fixture as the polished oak counters and brass fixtures that gave New England Trust its air of established reliability. At 9:17 a.m., my desk phone rang. "Operations, this is Barbara," I answered crisply. "Barbara, can you come to the conference room?" David Palmer, our regional director, rarely visited our branch. His presence usually signaled major announcements. "Of course, right away," I replied, smoothing my navy skirt as I rose. The conference room held David, my direct supervisor Melanie, and a woman I didn't recognize with sleek dark hair and a tablet in front of her. The air smelled of fresh coffee and something less definable, anticipation, perhaps anxiety. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I entered, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Barbara, thanks for coming. This is Stephanie from HR," David said, not quite meeting my eyes. My stomach tightened as I took the offered seat. 29 years of institutional knowledge resided in my brain. I knew every customer, every procedure, every workaround for our outdated systems. "We're making some organizational changes," Melanie said, her voice professionally neutral. At 42, she'd been my supervisor for 3 years, though I'd trained her when she first joined the bank. "The company is shifting toward a more dynamic approach to customer engagement." The words that followed blurred together as my pulse pounded in my ears. Restructuring, fresh perspective, digital transformation. But one phrase cut through with perfect clarity when Stephanie finally spoke. "We're looking for someone who better represents the direction we're heading." "I'm not sure I understand," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "My performance reviews have been exemplary. I've exceeded targets consistently." David cleared his throat. "It's not about performance, Barbara. You've been a valuable employee. It's about the bank's image moving forward. We're targeting younger demographics, and frankly, we need team members who, double quotes, he paused, searching for the right corporate euphemism, who reflect that energy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Who reflect that energy. The unspoken truth hung in the air between us at 53. I was too old to be the face of New England Trust, despite my capabilities, despite my dedication. The conference room suddenly seemed overlaid with the bridal salon. Different settings, identical message, that old face. Who reflect that energy. "We're offering a generous severance package," Stephanie said, sliding papers toward me. 6 months salary, extended health benefits, outplacement services. Her manicured fingernail tapped on signature lines as she outlined the terms. "We'll need you to train your replacement over the next 2 weeks." My replacement. The words echoed as I mechanically signed where indicated. A lifetime of conditioning to be agreeable overwhelming the scream building inside me. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I caught a glimpse of a young woman waiting in the reception area, blonde, perhaps 28, scrolling on her phone. I recognized her type instantly. Bright, eager, half my age and salary requirements. "Can I have a moment to collect my things?" I asked, voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Of course," Melanie said, relief evident in her tone. "Take all the time you need." I returned to my desk, legs moving automatically while my mind raced. 29 years, 7,540 workdays, countless late nights and working weekends. The desk calendar showed my meticulous handwriting. Emma's final dress fitting on Thursday, wedding invitations to be mailed Friday. Life continuing while my professional identity was erased. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the photo of Emma's graduation. The small plant I'd kept alive for 15 years. The emergency chocolate I kept in my drawer for difficult days. This certainly qualified. The cold March rain beat against the windows as I carried my belongings to my car, having declined Melanie's offer to help. Water seeped into my leather pumps as I arranged the cardboard box in my trunk. 29 years reduced to a box and a severance agreement. I sat in the driver's seat, rain drumming on the roof, and felt something crack inside me, not breaking, but shifting, like ice in spring thaw. That evening, I didn't tell Emma about losing my job. Her wedding was 5 weeks away, and I had spent my entire life shielding her from my struggles. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, calculating with brutal precision, $97,435 in savings, $432,560 in retirement funds I couldn't touch without penalties for another 5 years, $2,745 monthly mortgage payment for another 12 years. $1,698 in monthly expenses. No partner to lean on, no inheritance to expect. The numbers stared back at me, cold and unforgiving. I opened a bottle of Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion, and poured a generous glass. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dinner with Michael's family, Sunday. Regina wants to discuss seating arrangements. Wear something nice." Something nice. Code for, try to look younger. I didn't respond. The next morning, I awoke with unusual clarity, despite the half-empty wine bottle on my nightstand. Instead of panic, I felt a strange calm as I showered. the hot water sluicing away tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. I dressed carefully in my best interview suit, applied makeup with precision, and drove not to the bank, where I was expected to begin training my replacement, but to Hartwell and Associates, the law firm where my college roommate Patricia had become a partner specializing in employment law. They said what? Patricia's voice rose as she leaned forward across her desk. At 55, she radiated the confidence I had always admired. Her silver hair cut in an expensive, fashionable bob, her office overlooking the Boston Harbor. Barbara, that's textbook age discrimination. They were careful, I replied. Used all the right euphemisms. Nothing explicitly about age, but clear enough in context. Patricia said, making notes. How long did you say you've been there? 29 years. And your performance reviews? Exemplary. I have copies of all of them. Smart girl. Patricia nodded approvingly. Always were organized. What about recent hires in your department? All under 35 from what I've seen. Patricia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. And who else was let go in this restructuring? Janet in loans, she's 57, and George from business accounts, early 60s I believe, while younger employees kept their positions. I nodded, watching understanding dawn on Patricia's face. For the first time since the bridal salon, I felt something besides shame, a flicker of righteous anger. Barbara, Patricia said slowly, this isn't just wrong, it's actionable. What do you mean? I asked, though something in me already knew. I mean you have grounds for an age discrimination lawsuit under the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. I mean we can fight this. Patricia's eyes gleamed with professional interest. I mean you don't have to quietly disappear like they expect you to. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Fight back, make noise, be difficult. None of these aligned with the accommodating woman I'd been conditioned to be. I don't know, Patty, I said, using her college nickname. The severance is decent. Maybe I should just take it and try to find another job. At 53, in banking, after they've pushed you out. Be realistic. Patricia's bluntness was why I'd sought her out. They're counting on you being too proud, too polite, or too beaten down to challenge them. What do you have to lose by fighting? What did I have to lose? The question echoed as I drove home, past the bank where I'd spent nearly 3 decades, where Melanie had left 3 increasingly concerned voicemails about my absence. What did I have to lose except the false comfort of being the agreeable woman who caused no trouble? The woman who nodded when told her face would ruin her daughter's wedding photos. That evening, I didn't call the bank back. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled Evidence. I began meticulously documenting everything: dates, times, exact wording of conversations. I pulled up the employee directory and created a spreadsheet of recent terminations and hires, noting ages where I knew them. A pattern emerged in black and white: employees over 50 being systematically replaced by those decades younger, usually at lower salaries. My hands moved with increasing certainty as the hours passed, the familiar comfort of organized data giving shape to what had felt like formless injustice. Sunday arrived, and with it, the dreaded dinner with Regina and Michael's family. I stood before my closet, contemplating what something nice meant in Regina's lexicon. My hand hovered over a conservative navy dress before moving decisively to the red wrap dress I'd purchased years ago but never had the courage to wear. Too bold, I'd thought. Too attention-seeking for a woman my age. I paired it with heels higher than my usual sensible pumps and earrings that caught the light when I moved. Mom, wow, Emma said, when I arrived at the upscale restaurant Regina had chosen. Her surprise held a note of uncertainty, as though my appearance disrupted some unspoken agreement. You look, different. Thank you, sweetheart, I replied, kissing her cheek and leaving a perfect crimson lip print that I didn't hurry to wipe away. Michael's father Robert nodded approvingly as I took my seat, while Regina's smile tightened at the edges. Barbara, what a statement, she said, eyes cataloging my appearance with barely concealed disapproval. At 61, Regina had the aggressively maintained appearance of someone fighting time with every weapon in the cosmetic arsenal. I thought we agreed on the cream and navy color palette for family functions related to the wedding, did we? I must have missed that memo, I replied pleasantly, accepting the wine list from the waiter. I selected a bold Cabernet, ignoring Regina's suggestion of a lighter Pinot Grigio that might be more appropriate. Throughout dinner, I felt Regina's gaze tracking me like a predator assessing threat levels. I engaged Robert in conversation about his investment firm, asked intelligent questions about market trends that drew him out, making him laugh at observations sharper than he'd expected. I spoke about books with Michael's sister, finding common ground in our love of historical fiction. I complimented the chef's béarnaise sauce technique, revealing my knowledge of French cooking. With each interaction, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been submerged beneath the label of Emma's mother, or aging bank manager. When the conversation turned to wedding photos, Regina pointedly discussed the importance of cohesive aesthetics and visual harmony. "We're aiming for a certain look," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Very editorial, very clean." "Clean," I repeated, sipping my wine. Interesting choice of word. A small crease appeared between Emma's eyebrows. "Mom, what Regina means?" Michael interjected smoothly. "Is that the photographer has a very specific artistic style?" "I'm sure she does," I replied, setting down my glass with deliberate care. "And I'm equally sure my presence won't contaminate her artistic vision, considering I'll be the mother of the bride, regardless of whether I'm documented in the official record." The table fell silent. Emma's cheeks flushed pink as she studied her plate. Regina's mouth opened and closed without sound, while Robert looked between us in confusion. "No one said anything about contamination," Regina finally managed, "didn't they?" I asked, meeting her gaze directly. I believe the exact phrase was that I would ruin everything with that old face. Emma's head snapped up. "What? When was this said?" "At the bridal salon," I replied, never breaking eye contact with Regina, whose complexion had gone from carefully bronzed to ashen. "I wasn't meant to hear it, of course." "Regina, you didn't," Michael said, his expression horrified. Regina's laugh was brittle as she reached for her water glass. "Barbara must have misunderstood. In the excitement of wedding planning, things get said that come out wrong." "I understand perfectly," I said, placing my napkin beside my plate and standing. "Emma, sweetheart, I need to head home. Early morning tomorrow." I kissed her forehead, noting the confusion and hurt in her eyes. "Call me tomorrow. We should talk." As I walked to my car, the spring evening air cool against my heated skin, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the electric thrill of standing my ground. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, what happened back there? Are you okay?" I didn't answer immediately. For once, I wanted my daughter to sit with the question, to wonder about my feelings rather than me automatically reassuring her. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:15 a.m. I was already dressed for a meeting with Patricia, reviewing documents over coffee. "Mom." Emma's voice sounded small, uncertain. "Did Regina really say that about you?" "Yes," I answered simply. The silence stretched before Emma spoke again. "Why didn't you tell me? What would you have done if I had?" Another pause. "I don't know. That's why I didn't tell you," I said, surprised by my own calmness. "Emma, I've spent your entire life making things easier for you, smoothing over difficulties, stepping back so you could shine. It's what mothers do. But I'm not just your mother. I'm a person with my own dignity." "I know that," she protested. "Do you?" "Because sometimes I think I forgot it myself." I took a deep breath. "Emma, something else has happened. I lost my job last week." "What? How? Why didn't you say anything?" "For the same reason. I didn't want to burden you before the wedding." I explained the situation in simple terms, leaving out the raw humiliation, the calculation behind the bank's decision. "That's awful," Emma said. "What will you do?" The question hung between us, the expectation that I would adapt, accommodate, find some solution that required nothing from her. The pattern was so ingrained that I almost fell into it automatically. "I'm meeting with a lawyer today," I said instead. "I'm considering a lawsuit against the bank." Her sharp intake of breath told me everything about how she perceived me, the reliable, uncomplaining mother who solved problems without fuss. A lawsuit, Mom, is that really necessary? Couldn't you just find another job, at my age, with that old face? The words came out more sharply than intended. That's not what I meant, Emma said quickly. I just worry about the stress, the publicity, especially with the wedding so close. There it was, the concern not for my financial future or dignity, but for how my actions might impact her perfect day. I felt a profound sadness settle over me, not anger. Emma, I said gently, for once, this isn't about you or your wedding. This is about me refusing to be erased because society finds aging women inconvenient. I paused, giving her time to absorb this. I love you more than anything, but I need to fight this battle. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, her voice came back, smaller than before. I had no idea you felt erased. I know, I said. That's part of the problem. After we hung up, I drove to Patricia's office with a curious lightness. The meeting with her and her colleague specializing in employment law lasted 3 hours. We outlined the case, identified potential witnesses, developed a strategy. For the first time in decades, I felt fully engaged, my intelligence and experience valued rather than dismissed. We'll file next week, Patricia said as the meeting concluded. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. And Barbara, prepare yourself. This won't be easy. They'll try to paint you as difficult, as underperforming, as unnecessarily litigious. I've been called worse, I replied, thinking of that old face. The following day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Barbara Winters. This is Janet Hoffman. Janet had been the loan officer at my branch, let go the same week as me after 22 years of service. We'd been cordial colleagues but never close friends. Janet, how are you? I asked, genuinely concerned. Struggling, she admitted. I've sent out 37 applications. 2 responses, no interviews. Her voice cracked slightly. My husband thinks I should just retire, but we can't afford it. Not with Emily still in college. I hesitated only briefly. Janet, I'm considering legal action against the bank. Age discrimination. Would you be willing to talk about your experience? The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. They had me sign a non-disparagement agreement, she finally said. For the severance. I understand, I replied, disappointment settling in my chest. But, Janet continued slowly, if I were subpoenaed, legally required to testify, that would be different, wouldn't it? A smile spread across my face. Yes, Janet. That would be very different. Then, I think we should have coffee, she said, a new firmness in her voice. Tomorrow, that place across from the library. Over the next week, I met with 5 former colleagues who had been restructured out of New England Trust. George from business accounts, Marilyn from customer service, Frank from facilities management, Teresa from compliance. All over 50. All replaced by employees decades younger. All with stories of subtle comments, of being excluded from team-building events, of watching their responsibilities gradually shifted to younger colleagues. They started scheduling meetings at 7 p.m. At that new brewpub, George confided, stirring his coffee. Knew I couldn't make it with my wife's dialysis schedule. Then used those meetings to plan the department restructuring. My new supervisor suggested I might be more comfortable not handling the social media accounts, Teresa added. Said the platforms evolve so quickly, and might be frustrating for me. I have a master's in digital marketing I earned 2 years ago. Each conversation strengthened my resolve and my case. Patricia called with updates, explaining how she was building the pattern of discrimination, documenting the age disparity in terminations versus new hires. They've asked for a meeting, she told me 3 weeks after we filed the initial complaint. Their attorneys want to discuss a settlement. Already, I asked, surprised. They don't want publicity, Barbara. Age discrimination cases are bad for the brand, especially for a bank that prides itself on tradition and trustworthiness. I thought of David's carefully phrased explanation, of the practiced sympathy in Stephanie's eyes as she pushed the severance agreement toward me. Of Regina's dismissal of my presence in wedding photos, of Emma's initial silence in the bridal salon. I'm not interested in a quick, quiet settlement, I said, surprised by my own certainty. Barbara, be practical, Patricia urged. A settlement guarantees compensation without the stress and uncertainty of a trial. This isn't just about money, I replied. It's about making visible what happened to me, what's happening to women like me everywhere. I want my day in court, Patty. I want to tell my story. The silence told me Patricia was calculating her approach. As your friend, I understand. As your lawyer, I have to advise that trials are unpredictable. So is being a woman over 50 in America, I countered. I'll take my chances. 2 days later, my doorbell rang at 10:17 a.m. I opened it to find Emma standing on my porch, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Hi, she said. Can we talk? I stepped back, gesturing her inside. My living room was unrecognizable from her last visit. The dining table covered with documents, legal pads filled with notes, my laptop surrounded by coffee cups. You've been busy, she observed, taking in the controlled chaos. Very, I agreed, clearing a space for her on the sofa. Mom, about the wedding photos, she began as I filled the kettle. I had no idea Regina said that to you. I know, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. You were excited about wedding plans. Regina has strong opinions. That's not an excuse, Emma said. A flash of the determined child she'd once been breaking through. I should have stood up for you. I set 2 mugs on the coffee table and sat beside her. Yes, you should have. Emma's eyes widened slightly at my directness. The old me would have rushed to reassure her, to smooth over the moment. Instead, I waited. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she continued, fingering the tassels on a throw pillow. About being erased. About refusing to be invisible. She looked up, her eyes so like mine, meeting my gaze directly. I called off the wedding. Of all the things I had expected, this wasn't one of them. Emma, that's drastic. I never wanted. It's not just about what Regina said, she interrupted, though that was part of it. It's what Michael did, or didn't do. When I confronted him about his mother's behavior, he said I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that I needed to focus on the bigger picture. Her voice hardened. Then he suggested I was being too emotional because of wedding stress. I heard the echo of 1,000 dismissals in her words, recognized the familiar pattern of gaslighting I'd experienced throughout my own life. The thing is, Emma continued, I suddenly realized I was looking at my future. I saw myself slowly erasing parts of myself to fit his family's expectations. Saw myself becoming invisible by degrees. Just like she stopped abruptly. Just like me, I finished quietly. She nodded, tears welling. I don't want that, Mom. I don't want to wake up at 53 and realize I've spent my life accommodating people who don't value me. I felt a complicated tangle of emotions, grief for her pain, pride in her clarity, and a startling recognition that my own stand had somehow catalyzed hers. I'm sorry about the wedding, I said, meaning it. Emma shrugged, wiping her eyes. I'm not really. It was becoming more about Regina's vision than our relationship anyway. She gestured at the papers surrounding us. Tell me about your case. How can I help? For the next 3 hours, we talked in a way we hadn't since she was a teenager. I explained the details of the lawsuit, the pattern of discrimination, the colleagues who had come forward. Emma, with her background in marketing, offered insights about the bank's recent rebranding campaign targeting millennials. They've been positioning themselves as young, dynamic, forward-thinking for the past year, she noted, pulling up their social media on her phone. Look at these images, not a single employee over 40 in their promotional materials. Even though I bet most of their management team is older. As evening approached, Emma ordered takeout, and we continued strategizing. For the first time, we related as 2 adult women, not just as mother and daughter. When she left, she hugged me fiercely. I'm proud of you, Mom, she whispered, for fighting back. The words settled in my chest like a warm stone, radiating unexpected strength. The following Tuesday, I met with Patricia to prepare for my deposition. The bank's attorneys would question me under oath, probing for inconsistencies, seeking weaknesses in my case. They'll try to rattle you, Patricia warned, make you emotional, provoke you into saying something damaging. Remember, this isn't personal to them, it's strategy. It's very personal to me, I replied. I know. That's both your strength and your vulnerability. Patricia passed me a thick folder. These are the questions they're likely to ask. Study them. Practice your answers. Be factual. Be concise. Be composed. For the next week, I immersed myself in preparation, reviewing documents until my eyes burned, practicing responses until they flowed naturally. Emma came by daily, playing the role of aggressive attorney, pushing me to maintain composure when questioned about my qualifications, my performance, my value to the bank. The morning of the deposition arrived with unexpected clarity. I dressed in a charcoal suit that conveyed seriousness without trying to appear younger than my 53 years. My makeup was precise but minimal, my silver-streaked hair worn loose rather than in its usual conservative twist. I wanted the attorneys to see exactly who I was, a competent professional woman of a certain age, neither apologizing for nor attempting to disguise that fact. The conference room at Patricia's firm felt like a stage set, with court reporter, attorneys, and bank representatives arranged around a polished table. David Palmer was there, looking uncomfortable in my direct gaze. Stephanie from HR sat beside the bank's lead counsel, a man in his 60s whose own age made their position seem particularly hypocritical. For 4 hours, they questioned me about my employment history, my performance, my relationships with colleagues, my understanding of the bank's restructuring plans. I answered truthfully but strategically, as Patricia had coached me. Mrs. Winters, the lead attorney said, "Isn't it possible that your termination was based purely on the bank's legitimate business needs rather than any discriminatory intent?" "Possible, perhaps," I replied evenly. "Probable, no. Not when 9 employees over 50 were terminated within a 6-month period and replaced with employees under 35, all during a rebranding campaign specifically targeting younger customers. That could be coincidence," he suggested. "In my 29 years in banking," I replied, "I found that $4.7 million in termination costs is rarely coincidental." A muscle twitched in his jaw as he shuffled papers. "Mrs. Winters, would you say you had difficulty adapting to technological changes in banking services?" "No, I would not," I answered, maintaining eye contact. "I completed advanced digital banking certification last year, scoring in the 97th percentile. I implemented the mobile deposit verification system that the bank still uses. I trained younger employees on our legacy systems that they struggled to navigate." The questioning continued, growing increasingly pointed. Had I ever felt overlooked for advancement before? Yes, twice, both times in favor of younger male colleagues with less experience. Had I ever expressed frustration about working with younger team members? No. I mentored 17 junior employees during my tenure, all of whom had provided positive feedback. By the final hour, the attorney's frustration was palpable. "Mrs. Winters, why didn't you simply accept the generous severance package and move on? Why pursue this potentially damaging action against an institution where you spent nearly 3 decades? I paused, considering the real question beneath his words. Why couldn't I disappear quietly? "Because I believe in accountability," I said finally. "I believe that 29 years of exemplary service deserves better than being discarded for having that old face. I believe other women and men shouldn't have their value reduced to their appearance or birth year." As the deposition concluded, Patricia squeezed my hand under the table, a silent acknowledgement of a battle well fought. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Barbara Winters?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, this is Barbara. My name is Caroline Webster. I work in marketing at New England Trust." She spoke quickly, nervously. "We've never met, but I followed your work on the regional branch integration project last year. How can I help you, Caroline?" I asked, curious about this unexpected contact. "I heard about your case," she said, "through office chatter. I wanted you to know something. I waited, sensing her hesitation. There was a meeting, she continued, about 6 months ago. Leadership and marketing. They discussed the rebranding strategy explicitly in terms of cultivating a younger image, both with customers and staff. There was a PowerPoint presentation that outlined gradually transitioning out legacy employees to align with the new brand identity. My pulse quickened. Do you have a copy of this presentation? A pause. Yes. And emails discussing implementation timelines. I've been wondering what would happen when I hit their apparent cutoff age. Caroline, I said carefully, would you be willing to share those documents with my attorney? The silence stretched. I could lose my job, she finally said. You could, I acknowledged. Or you could help change the system that would eventually discard you too. 3 days later, Patricia called, her voice vibrating with barely contained excitement. We have the smoking gun, she said without preamble. Caroline's documents explicitly outlined targeting employees over 54 termination to create a more youthful brand presence. The idiots actually put it in writing. What does this mean for the case? I asked, my heart racing. It means they'll be calling with a settlement offer by end of business today, Patricia replied, and not the insulting figure they initially proposed. This is corporate attorney panic territory. True to her prediction, the call came at 4:47 p.m. The bank's offer had increased tenfold, along with a guarantee of continued health benefits until Medicare eligibility. But there was a condition. They're insisting on a confidentiality clause, Patricia explained. Standard in these settlements, but particularly important to them given the explicit nature of the evidence. You wouldn't be able to discuss the case or the terms. Silenced again, I murmured. Barbara, this is a significant victory, Patricia reminded me. Financial security, an implicit admission of wrongdoing. But no public accountability, I countered. No precedent. No deterrent to prevent them from doing this to someone else, just with better document hygiene next time. Patricia sighed. The sound of a friend and lawyer weighing competing responsibilities. What do you want to do? I thought of Regina's dismissal, of Emma's initial silence, of the easy way David had explained away my termination. I thought of Caroline, risking her job to expose the truth, of Janet and George and Teresa, all made to feel obsolete, despite their capabilities. I want to go to trial, I said firmly. I want a public verdict. No confidentiality, no quiet disappearance. The weeks leading up to the trial transformed my home into a war room. Patricia and her team worked tirelessly, preparing exhibits, coaching witnesses, refining strategy. Caroline had been deposed, her documentation creating a stir in legal circles. 3 other current bank employees had come forward with supporting testimony after learning of her evidence. The bank made increasingly desperate settlement offers, all with the same requirement of silence. Emma became my unexpected rock, fielding calls, organizing documents, bringing food when I forgot to eat. She had started her own journey of transformation, dyeing her hair its natural color after years of highlights, speaking more assertively in her marketing job, questioning the ageist messaging in campaigns she was asked to create. We were changing together, our relationship deepening beyond the traditional mother-daughter dynamic into something like true friendship. 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, I received another call from the bank's attorneys. The offer had doubled again, with one significant change. They would allow me to speak publicly about the case in general terms, though specific financial details would remain confidential. It's an extraordinary concession, Patricia admitted when we discussed it over dinner at her home that evening. They're terrified of Caroline's PowerPoint and those emails being entered into public record. Once that happens, every employee over 40 who's been terminated could have grounds for similar action. I pushed my salmon around my plate, weighing the options. The settlement would secure my financial future, allow me some measure of public voice, and avoid the stress of trial. What would you do? I asked Patricia. She considered the question carefully, sipping her wine. As your attorney, I'd advise accepting. It's a win by any objective measure. She set down her glass. As your friend who watched you transform from the woman who apologized for existing to the warrior sitting before me now. I'd say follow your gut. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my bedroom window, watching the spring rain tap against the glass, creating rivulets that distorted the streetlights outside. The peaceful neighborhood where I'd raised Emma stretched before me, traditional, predictable, comfortable, like the life I'd carefully constructed, like the woman I'd been trained to be. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Winters, this is Melanie from the bank. Could we meet tomorrow? Just us. It's important. My former supervisor, reaching out directly, bypassing attorneys. Intriguing. We met at a small cafe, 40 minutes outside Boston, away from familiar eyes. Melanie looked different somehow, less polished, more human in casual clothes, without the corporate armor we'd both worn for years. Thank you for coming, she said, nervously turning her coffee mug. I shouldn't be talking to you without counsel present, but I needed to tell you something. I waited, watching her internal struggle play across her features. They're doing it to me now, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Last week, David told me they're going in a different direction with my position. I'm being transitioned out next month. I'm 42. The irony might have been satisfying if her pain wasn't so palpable. I'm sorry, Melanie. The thing is, she continued, after what happened with you, I started noticing patterns. How the women in leadership seem to vanish around a certain age. How the men can be 65 with gray hair, and are called distinguished, while women are pushed toward early retirement or impossible performance metrics that justify termination. Her eyes met mine directly. Your case scared them, but it hasn't changed them. They're just being more careful about the paper trail. Why are you telling me this? I asked gently. Melanie straightened her shoulders. Because I've documented everything since your termination. Every comment, every email, every meeting. I have a log of 23 employees over 40 who've been pushed out in the past 10 months across the regional branches, compared with hiring data showing 27 new employees under 35 for the same positions. She pulled a thumb drive from her purse and placed it on the table between us. They offered me a severance package, contingent on confidentiality. I haven't signed yet. I stared at the small device containing potentially case-changing evidence. Melanie, are you sure? This could impact your settlement. I'm sure, she said, a new resolution in her voice. Watching you fight back. It made me realize I don't want to be complicit anymore, even if it means financial uncertainty. As I drove home, the thumb drive secure in my pocket, I felt a shifting in my understanding of the battle I was fighting. It had begun as personal, my job, my dignity, my refusal to be erased. But it had grown into something larger. Melanie's evidence, combined with Caroline's documents and the testimony of other employees, could potentially impact corporate policy beyond just New England Trust. This wasn't just about me anymore. That evening, I called Patricia. I've decided, I said when she answered. No settlement. We go to trial. Are you absolutely certain? She asked. The offer on the table is substantial. I'm certain, I replied. Thinking of Melanie, of Caroline, of Emma, watching to see what her mother would do when pushed to the wall. And I have something that might strengthen our case considerably. The trial began on a brilliant June morning. I had expected to feel nervous, but instead found myself filled with an almost serene determination as I walked up the courthouse steps. Emma beside me, Patricia ahead with her legal team. News cameras captured our ascent. The case had attracted attention in business circles after the Boston Globe ran a feature on age discrimination in the financial industry. Inside the courtroom, I was struck by how ordinary it seemed for such a pivotal battleground. Polished wood, muted colors, the subtle scent of furniture polish and paper. The bank's legal team occupied one table, their expressions professionally neutral. David Palmer sat behind them, his usual confidence visibly diminished. I didn't see Stephanie from HR. Patricia's opening statement was masterful, laying out not just the facts of my termination, but the broader pattern it represented. This case is about more than one woman's job, she told the jury. It's about a systemic devaluation of experience and wisdom in favor of youth and appearance. It's about corporate culture that views women over 50 as disposable. Despite their proven capabilities and contributions, the bank's attorney countered with arguments about business necessity, restructuring requirements, and market demands, all delivered without directly addressing the documented targeting of older employees that formed the core of our case. Over the next 7 days, witnesses testified to the bank's practices. Caroline presented her documentation, projecting the damning PowerPoint slides on a screen for all to see. The language was unmistakable. Phase out legacy personnel to align with youthful brand identity and transition plan for 50-plus employees. Prioritizing client-facing positions. Janet described being told her traditional approach no longer fit the bank's direction, despite consistently exceeding loan targets. George recounted being excluded from team events scheduled at times and venues that effectively ensured older employees couldn't attend. Then came Melanie's testimony, unexpected by the bank's legal team, who visibly stiffened as she was called to the stand. With composed precision, she detailed the continuation of discriminatory practices, even after my termination, presenting her meticulously organized evidence of the bank's actions across multiple branches. The jury listened intently, several taking notes as she spoke. My own testimony came on the 6th day. As I took the stand, I surveyed the courtroom, Emma in the front row, Patricia at our table, reviewing notes, the bank's attorneys conferring urgently, and behind them, a row of unfamiliar women who had been present throughout the trial. I would later learn they were former employees from various industries, following the case as a potential precedent for their own situations. Mrs. Winters, the bank's attorney, began his cross-examination after Patricia had finished her questions. Would you say you have a vendetta against New England Trust for terminating your employment? I considered the question carefully. No, I replied. I have a commitment to accountability for discriminatory practices. There's a difference. You turned down multiple settlement offers that most people would consider extremely generous, he continued. Why pursue this public spectacle if not for vengeance? Because some things are more important than money, I said simply. Like dignity, like truth, like ensuring other women don't experience what I did. He shifted tactics. Mrs. Winters, isn't it possible that the bank simply needed employees with more current skills and perspectives for its new direction? If skills and perspectives were truly the criteria, I countered, then the bank would have conducted performance evaluations focused on those elements before termination decisions. Instead, employees with consistently excellent reviews and current certifications were targeted based on a single common factor, their age. For nearly 3 hours, the questioning continued. The attorney tried to frame me as bitter, as resistant to change, as exaggerating isolated incidents into a pattern. One maintained my composure, responding with specific examples, dates, figures, when he implied I hadn't tried hard enough to adapt to new technologies. I recited the 12 professional development courses I'd completed in the previous 2 years, all at my own expense and on my own time. When he suggested I might have been difficult to work with, I referenced my personnel file containing 29 years of positive evaluations and colleague testimonials. Mrs. Winters, he finally asked, seemingly frustrated, at any point did anyone at New England Trust explicitly tell you that your age was the reason for your termination? No, I admitted. They were careful about that. A slight smile of satisfaction crossed his face. But, I continued before he could move on. When you tell a 53-year-old woman with exemplary performance that she doesn't reflect the energy you're looking for, while systematically replacing employees over 50 with those under 35, the message is unmistakable, even if the words are carefully chosen. When finally excused, I felt drained but unbroken. Emma gave me a subtle thumbs up as I passed, and I noticed one of the unknown women in the back, dabbing at her eyes. That evening, as I reviewed my testimony with Patricia at her office, a breaking news alert appeared on her computer screen. The headline read, New England Trust CEO steps down amid discrimination trial. Patricia quickly pulled up the article, which detailed how the bank's executive board had asked for the CEO's resignation following revelations of systematic age discrimination emerging from the trial. The bank's stock had dropped 7% since the trial began. This changes things, Patricia said, leaning back in her chair. The board will be in damage control mode now. They might come back with an even better offer to end this quickly. Or dig in deeper, I suggested. Double down on denial to protect what's left of their reputation. Patricia's phone rang as if on cue. It's their lead counsel, she said, glancing at the screen. Let me take this. I watched her facial expressions shift as she listened, inserting an occasional "I see" or "that's interesting." When she hung up, she looked at me with a mixture of surprise and respect. They want to settle. Now, tonight, if possible. No confidentiality clause. Full admission of wrongdoing. Public apology. Triple the last offer. And she paused, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. They want you to consider joining a newly formed diversity and inclusion committee that will specifically address age discrimination in their hiring and retention practices. I stared at her, processing this unexpected turn. They want the person suing them to help fix their problems. The board apparently recognizes that the best person to help solve a problem is often the one who identified it. Patricia replied. Plus, it's an excellent PR move. Shows they're serious about change. I considered the offer, weighing it against what continuing the trial might accomplish. The settlement would provide everything I'd fought for: financial security, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and even a path to creating institutional change from within. What do you think? I asked Patricia. As your attorney, I think it's an exceptional offer that guarantees victory without risk, she replied. As your friend, I think you've already won by refusing to be silenced. This gives you a platform to continue that work. The settlement was finalized by midnight. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the news had broken nationwide. My phone buzzed continuously, with messages, former colleagues offering congratulations, friends expressing amazement, and surprisingly, women I'd never met, sharing their own stories of workplace age discrimination. Emma arrived at my house by 10, carrying coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery. Mom, have you seen the news? You're trending. She showed me her phone where my name appeared in social media discussions about workplace discrimination, corporate accountability, and women's rights. I didn't do this to become a trending topic, I said, slightly overwhelmed by the attention. No, Emma agreed, squeezing my hand. You did it because it was right. And now other women see that standing up is possible. Over the following weeks, I received speaking requests from women's professional organizations, universities, and even corporate HR departments, wanting to learn from our mistakes, as one apologetic email put it. My first meeting with the New England Trust Diversity Committee was scheduled for July 15th, exactly 4 months after I'd been escorted from the building with my belongings in a cardboard box. The night before the meeting, I stood before my closet, contemplating what to wear for my return to the bank. The conservative navy suits that had been my uniform for decades held no appeal. Neither did anything that might be perceived as trying too hard to look younger. I finally selected a beautifully tailored crimson dress, professional but unapologetically vibrant, neither hiding nor denying my age. Entering the bank the next morning felt surreal. The same polished floors, the same mahogany counters, yet everything had changed. Employees watched curiously as I was escorted to the executive conference room, not the smaller room where I'd been terminated, but the top floor space reserved for board meetings and major announcements. The new interim CEO greeted me personally, along with the head of HR who had replaced Stephanie. Mrs. Winters, thank you for agreeing to help us address these issues, the CEO said, extending his hand. At around 60, with silver hair and lines of experience etched in his face, he was older than many executives I'd encountered. Your insights will be invaluable. The committee included senior managers, HR specialists, and importantly, employees of varying ages, including several over 50, who had survived the restructuring. We spent the first hour reviewing the bank's current policies, identifying problematic patterns, and discussing ways to create more age-inclusive practices. When asked for my input, I spoke frankly. The issue isn't just policy, it's culture. When experience is devalued in favor of youth, when innovation is treated as exclusive to younger employees, when terms like digital native become proxies for age discrimination, no policy alone will solve the problem. The room grew quiet, tension palpable as executives exchanged glances. That single quotes a bold assessment, the interim CEO finally said. "You asked for my perspective," I replied evenly. "I assumed you wanted honesty, not comfort." To my surprise, he laughed a genuine, appreciative sound. "Exactly right, Mrs. Winters. Comfort is what got us into this mess. Please, continue." For the next 2 hours, I outlined specific recommendations, blind resume reviews that removed age indicators, mentorship programs pairing older and younger employees for mutual skill sharing, explicit valuation of institutional knowledge and performance reviews, and most controversially, age diversity quotas in hiring and promotion decisions. Some will argue that's reverse discrimination, the HR director warned. Some will, I agreed. Just as they did with gender and racial diversity initiatives. But until unconscious bias is eliminated, which frankly, may never happen, conscious inclusion is necessary. As the meeting concluded, the interim CEO asked if I would consider a more formal role with the bank, a paid consultancy to implement the changes we'd discussed. "I'll consider it," I said, surprising myself with my openness to the idea. "But I'll need complete independence and direct reporting to the board." "Of course," he agreed without hesitation. As I left the building, I noticed employees watching me with expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. A young woman from the marketing department, perhaps 25, stepped forward as I waited for the elevator. "Mrs. Winters, I just wanted to say, what you did was incredible. It's changed things here already. The way people talk, the way managers make decisions." She glanced around before continuing quietly, "I hope I have your courage when I'm your age." I smiled at her earnestness. "The trick is to have that courage at your age," I told her. "It only gets harder if you wait." The elevator doors opened, and as I stepped inside, I caught my reflection in the polished brass panel, a woman standing straight, head high, eyes clear. That old face looked remarkably like courage to me now. That evening, as I debriefed the meeting with Emma over dinner, she studied me with a thoughtful expression. "You know what's amazing? 6 months ago, you were devastated about not being in my wedding photos because of your appearance. Now you're reshaping corporate America's approach to aging." "Well, that might be overstating things a bit," I laughed. "Is it, though?" Emma persisted. "You've been asked to speak at 3 conferences. The settlement made national news. I've seen at least 5 think pieces referencing your case as a turning point in age discrimination litigation." I considered her words. The strange trajectory from that moment of humiliation in the bridal salon to this new chapter. I guess sometimes the most painful rejection puts you exactly where you need to be. "Speaking of which," Emma said, reaching for her phone, "I've been meaning to show you something." She pulled up a social media page for a dating service specifically for people over 50. "I think you should try this. And before you say no, which I can see you're about to, just consider that life isn't just about work. Even revolutionary, glass-ceiling shattering work." "Emma, I'm 53, not dead," I protested. "I know life isn't just about work, but dating. At my age, with that old face." She teased gently, echoing Regina's cruel words but transforming them with her affectionate tone. "Yes, Mom. With that experienced, intelligent, beautiful face that deserves to be seen in wedding photos and everywhere else." I felt a reflexive resistance. The ingrained belief that romantic possibility ended somewhere around 45, but something in me had fundamentally changed. If I could walk into that bank as a consultant rather than a terminated employee, if I could speak to audiences about valuing experience, perhaps I could also rewrite my assumptions about personal possibilities. "Fine," I said, taking the phone. "Show me how this works. But don't expect miracles." 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting at a waterfront restaurant waiting for Robert, a 60-year-old architect I'd connected with through the app. I'd been tempted to cancel multiple times, convinced this was ridiculous at my age. But Emma's gentle persistence had prevailed. As I checked my watch, he was 7 minutes late. I noticed my reflection in the window glass. I'd dressed carefully in a sapphire blue dress that complemented my eyes, applied makeup that enhanced rather than attempted to disguise my features, and left my silver-streaked hair loose around my shoulders. The woman looking back at me seemed both familiar and strange, the Barbara I'd always been, but with a presence I'd only recently claimed. Barbara, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, approached my table. "I'm Robert, I'm so sorry I'm late. Parking was a nightmare." "No problem," I replied, surprised by my calm. I was enjoying the view. Our conversation flowed with unexpected ease. Robert had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and was only now beginning to consider companionship again. He spoke of his work designing sustainable housing for seniors, his 2 adult children, his newfound passion for kayaking. I found myself sharing my own story, the discrimination case, my new consulting work, even Emma's canceled wedding. "Sounds like you've had quite a year," he observed, his eyes warm with interest, rather than pity. "I have," I agreed. "Not what I expected at 53, but somehow exactly what I needed." He raised his wineglass in a toast. 2 unexpected chapters. As dinner concluded, Robert suggested a walk along the harbor. The evening air carried the salt temps of the ocean, and lights from boats and buildings danced across the dark water. We strolled in comfortable conversation, occasionally falling into easy silence. "May I ask you something personal?" he finally said as we paused to watch a sailboat glide past. "You can ask," I replied, suddenly wary. Was this where the evening would take an awkward turn? What was it like, standing up against that kind of discrimination? It must have been terrifying. The question caught me off guard, not what I'd anticipated. I considered my answer carefully. It was terrifying, I admitted. But what was more terrifying was the thought of accepting it, of becoming the woman who disappears quietly when told she's inconvenient or unsightly. I turned to face him directly. I spent decades being that woman, accommodating, undemanding, grateful for whatever space others allowed me to occupy. I couldn't do it anymore. Robert nodded slowly. My wife used to say something similar near the end of her life, that she regretted all the times she made herself small to make others comfortable. His eyes met mine, remarkably free of judgment or expectation. "I find your refusal to do that anymore, compelling." The word lingered between us, not attractive or sexy, or any of the terms society typically values in women, but compelling. Recognition of something deeper than appearance, more meaningful than conventional beauty. When he walked me to my car later, he asked if he could see me again. I found myself saying yes, without the hesitation I'd expected. As I drove home, I realized I'd spent the entire evening without once apologizing for my appearance, without once trying to angle my face to hide the lines around my eyes or mouth. I had simply been present, engaged, myself. Over the following months, my life expanded in directions I couldn't have imagined. The consulting work with New England Trust led to similar opportunities with other financial institutions reviewing their employment practices. I spoke at a women's leadership conference where my session on aging, unapologetically in professional spaces, had to be moved to a larger venue due to unexpected attendance. I began writing articles for business publications about age discrimination and the economic cost of discarding experienced employees. My relationship with Robert developed with a deliberate pace that respected our individual lives and histories. Unlike the rushing intensity of younger relationships, we moved forward with thoughtful intention, neither denying our age nor allowing it to limit our connection. When he invited me to meet his children over dinner at his home, I approached the evening with a confidence that would have been impossible months earlier. His daughter Julia, 34, greeted me with polite reserve that softened as the evening progressed. His son Michael, 29, asked thoughtful questions about my discrimination case. Revealing his work as a labor attorney, neither treated me as an interloper or a curiosity, but simply as the woman their father was dating. "Dad seems really happy," Julia told me as we prepared coffee after dinner. "It's good to see. He's easy to be happy with," I replied honestly. She studied me for a moment before speaking again. "You know, when he said he was dating someone, I had all these assumptions about what you'd be like. Probably unfair ones. Oh, I kept my tone neutral, curious. I thought you'd be trying too hard, maybe, to look younger, to fit some idea of what a desirable woman should be. She looked embarrassed by her admission. I'm sorry, that sounds terrible. Not terrible, I assured her, just honest. We all absorb cultural messages about aging, especially for women. But you're not like that at all, she continued. You're just so present. So comfortable being exactly who you are. It's kind of inspiring, actually. Her words stayed with me long after that evening, the recognition that my refusal to apologize for my age had impact beyond legal cases and corporate policies. That simply existing comfortably in my experienced body could be a radical act in a world that expected women my age to either become invisible or engage in desperate efforts to appear younger. Summer transitioned to fall, bringing with it Emma's 30th birthday. She insisted on a small gathering at my home, inviting close friends and family, including Robert, who had become a welcome presence in our lives. As I prepared appetizers in the kitchen, I overheard Emma talking with two friends from her marketing firm. I can't believe what your mom did. One was saying, taking on a major bank like that. My mom would have just accepted the severance and complained privately for the rest of her life. Mine too. The other agreed. My mom apologizes for existing in spaces where she thinks younger people belong. It's heartbreaking. My mom used to be like that, Emma replied, her voice carrying a pride that warmed me from across the room. Now she's teaching me how to demand my proper space in the world. Later, as guests mingled in the backyard, where string lights created a gentle glow against the October evening, Robert found me arranging dessert plates. Need help? He offered, picking up serving utensils. Thanks. I smiled. Just trying to get these out before Emma opens gifts. He worked beside me for a moment before speaking again. I got a call from my daughter today. She's being considered for partner at her firm. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for Julia, who had proven to be as thoughtful and competent as she was initially reserved. It is, he agreed. But she's concerned about some comments that have been made. Questions about her long-term commitment given that she's 34 and unmarried. Suggestions that clients might prefer working with the male associate who's also up for partnership. I set down the plate I was holding. Gender discrimination instead of age discrimination. Different verse, same song. Exactly. She called to ask if you might be willing to talk with her. Give her some advice about documenting the situation, protecting herself professionally while standing her ground. I was momentarily speechless, deeply moved that Julia would seek my guidance. Of course, anytime. Robert's hand found mine, warm and steady. You've created ripples, Barbara, far beyond what you probably imagined when you first decided to fight back. Looking across the yard at Emma, laughing with her friends, at the life I was building that honored rather than apologized for my age and experience, I recognized the truth in his words. From that devastating moment in the bridal salon, she ruined everything with that old face, had come an unexpected liberation. Not just for me, but potentially for Emma, for Julia, for the young marketing assistant at the bank, for countless women navigating the treacherous waters of aging in a society that worshipped youth. The following week brought another unexpected development. Regina called Emma ostensibly to check in, but eventually working around to asking about me. Your mother seems to be doing well, she said carefully. I saw that article about her in Boston Business Monthly. Emma relayed this conversation to me with barely contained amusement. She actually asked if you'd be willing to speak to her women's charity group about resilience and reinvention after 50. Can you believe it? I laughed at the irony. The woman who thought my face would ruin wedding photos now wants me to address her charity. Apparently your old face is suddenly valuable, Emma teased. Are you going to do it? I considered the question seriously. You know what? I think I will. Not for Regina's approval, I'm well past needing that. But for any woman in that room who feels herself disappearing. The day of the charity luncheon arrived, crisp and clear. I dressed with deliberate care, a tailored burgundy suit that conveyed authority without apology. Minimal jewelry that included a silver pin. Emma had given me that read Simply Visible. Robert dropped me off with a supportive kiss and a promise to pick me up afterward. The venue was exactly what I'd expected. An exclusive country club where well-heeled women gathered to support causes while simultaneously reinforcing social hierarchies. Regina greeted me with brittle politeness, her face tight with what I recognized as recent cosmetic procedures. "Barbara, thank you for coming," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "Everyone's so looking forward to your talk." "I'm happy to be here," I replied with more graciousness than I felt. "An important cause." As I was escorted to the speaker's table, I noticed the composition of the room, primarily women in their 40s to 70s. All expertly maintained, all seemingly caught in the same desperate battle against time that Regina embodied. I recognized the anxiety in their perfectly arranged appearances, the fear of irrelevance that drove their careful conformity to beauty standards impossible to maintain with age. When Regina introduced me, she emphasized the discrimination case and my subsequent consulting work, carefully avoiding any mention of our personal connection or her previous assessment of my appearance. I thanked her politely before turning to address the room of nearly 100 women. "Ladies, I want to begin by asking you a question," I said, setting aside my prepared notes. "When was the last time you apologized for your age or appearance? Not for something you did or said, but for simply existing in your experienced body." The room grew uncomfortably quiet, eyes shifting, nervous adjustments of scarves and jewelry. I asked because until recently, I apologized constantly with my behavior, if not my words. By accepting exclusion, by spending thousands on products promising to erase evidence of my lived experience, by believing the cultural message that a woman's value diminishes with each passing year. I shared my story without embellishment, the bridal salon humiliation, the job termination, the decision to fight back. As I spoke, I watched expressions shift from polite interest to recognition to something deeper, a hunger for permission to exist without apology. The most revolutionary act available to women over 50 in America today is not fighting aging, it's embracing it. Claiming our rightful space with the full authority of our experience. Refusing to disappear when others find our reality inconvenient. By the time I concluded, the energy in the room had transformed. Women who had entered maintaining careful social masks were now nodding, some wiping discreet tears, others making notes with determined expressions. During the question period that followed, a woman perhaps in her 60s raised her hand. "I'm being pushed toward retirement at my law firm," she said, voice strong despite the vulnerability of her admission. Nothing explicit, just increasingly clear signals that I should make way for younger partners. "I've been telling myself it's time anyway, that fighting would be undignified. But listening to you, double quotes, fighting for your dignity is never undignified," I told her. "And you deserve better than to be discarded for the crime of experience." After the event, a line of women waited to speak with me privately. Some shared their own experiences of workplace discrimination. Others confided their exhaustion with maintaining appearances to meet impossible standards. One tearfully admitted her terror of attending her daughter's wedding next year, looking like this, gesturing to her perfectly normal 60-year-old face. "Your face tells the story of your life," I told her gently. "It belongs in every significant moment, including your daughter's wedding. Anyone who suggests otherwise needs to examine their values, not you, your appearance." As the crowd thinned, Regina approached, her expression unreadable. "That was quite impactful," she said. "Everyone's talking about it." "Thank you for the opportunity," I replied neutrally. She hesitated, seeming to struggle with something. "Barbara, about what happened with Emma's wedding photos. I may have been insensitive. The non-apology hung between us. A year ago, I might have rushed to ease her discomfort, to pretend the hurt hadn't cut deeply." The new Barbara waited, maintaining eye contact, neither accommodating her discomfort nor expressing anger. "I was wrong," she finally said, the words clearly difficult for her. "My obsession with appearances, it's exhausting. Watching you speak today, seeing how you've embraced your age instead of fighting it constantly like I do, double quotes." Her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "I'm just so tired of it all." The vulnerability in her admission surprised me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding settled over me. Regina was as much victim as perpetrator, imprisoned by the same cultural messaging that had nearly silenced me. "It doesn't have to be that way," I said simply. "There's freedom in putting down that burden." As Robert drove me home afterward, I recounted the event, including Regina's unexpected moment of honesty. "Sounds like you've given her something to think about," he observed. "Maybe some of those other women too." "Maybe," I agreed, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood come into view. "Or maybe just permission to consider another way of existing in the world after 50. When we reached my home, Robert turned to me with an expression I'd come to recognize: thoughtful consideration before saying something significant. "I have something to ask you," he said. "And I want to be clear that there's no pressure for an immediate answer." My heart quickened slightly. "All right." "I've been offered a 6-month project in Barcelona starting in January, designing a senior living community that integrates with the surrounding neighborhood rather than isolating older residents." His eyes held mine steadily. "I'd like you to consider coming with me. Not for the entire time necessarily, but perhaps for extended visits. You could write there, maybe do some consulting work with European firms interested in your perspective on age discrimination." The invitation hung between us, not marriage, not a conventional next step for a relationship, but something perfectly suited to who we were at this stage of life. Two established people with independent careers and perspectives, choosing to share experience rather than merge identities. "I'll consider it," I said, echoing my response to the bank's offer months earlier, but with warmth rather than wariness. "It sounds wonderful, actually." Later that evening, Emma called to ask about the charity event. As I described the women's responses, she listened thoughtfully before changing the subject. "Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm seeing someone new. His name is Daniel. He's an environmental attorney, and I'd really like you to meet him." "I'd love to," I replied, hearing something in her voice that suggested this relationship might be significant. "Great, maybe dinner next weekend," she suggested. "Oh, and Mom, fair warning, he's seen your articles and interviews. He thinks you're pretty amazing." His mother faced similar discrimination at her university, though she never fought it like you did. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch, watching fireflies illuminate the early autumn darkness. My phone buzzed with an email notification, another speaking request, this time from a national conference on women's leadership. A year ago, I would have declined immediately, convinced I had nothing valuable to offer, certain my old face would detract from whatever message I might deliver. Now, I typed a simple response: I would be honored to participate. The following Sunday, Emma brought Daniel for dinner. He proved to be thoughtful and articulate, engaging me in conversation about environmental law and social justice without condescension or superficiality. I watched Emma with him, her comfort, her confidence, her unwillingness to diminish herself to accommodate his ego. She had learned from my journey, just as I continued to learn from hers. "Your mom is exactly as impressive in person as in her interviews," Daniel told Emma as we cleared the dinner plates, not realizing I could hear from the kitchen. "My mother wishes she'd had your courage," he added, turning toward me as I returned. After 30 years teaching mathematics, they pushed her out with comments about fresh perspectives and digital teaching methods. She still regrets accepting it quietly. "Many women do," I acknowledged. "We're conditioned to prioritize harmony over justice, especially concerning our own treatment." "That's changing though," Emma interjected, "because of people like Mom who refuse to follow that script anymore." As autumn deepened toward winter, my professional life expanded beyond anything I could have imagined a year earlier. I traveled to Washington for policy meetings on age discrimination legislation, spoke at corporations about inclusive practices, and worked with HR professionals on revising, hiring, and retention approaches. At 54, I was more visible, more impactful, and more authentically myself than I had been at 34 or 44. The decision about Robert's Barcelona invitation occupied my thoughts during quiet moments. The old Barbara would have found reasons to decline responsibilities, practicality, the impropriety of a woman my age embarking on such an adventure. The new Barbara saw only possibility. I've been thinking about Barcelona. I told Robert over dinner at his home in early December. I'd like to come. Not for the entire 6 months, but perhaps 3 months. With flexibility to return for speaking engagements. I've already committed to. His smile warmed me more than the fire crackling in his hearth. That sounds perfect. I was hoping you'd say yes. There was a time I would have said no automatically. I admitted, found all the practical reasons why I couldn't possibly. And now, he asked, reaching for my hand across the table. Now I recognize that at 54, I've earned the right to prioritize joy alongside responsibility. To see what life might offer beyond the narrow boundaries I've accepted for so long. Later that week, I encountered Regina unexpectedly at a bookstore cafe. Since the charity event, we'd maintained a cautious civility during occasional interactions related to our overlapping social circles. She hesitated before approaching my table. "Barbara, hello. Are you enjoying the holiday season?" "Very much," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Would you like to join me?" She settled across from me, removing her designer scarf with practiced elegance. At 62, she remained meticulously maintained, but something had shifted in her demeanor since the charity event, a slight softening around the edges. "Perhaps, I've been following your speaking engagements," she said, surprising me. "The interview you gave about corporate policies on experienced workers was quite compelling." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely. "It's become something of a mission, I suppose." She nodded, fingering the rim of her coffee cup. "I've been thinking about what you said. About the freedom in putting down the burden of constantly fighting age." She met my eyes directly. "I've spent thousands on procedures, creams, treatments, structured my entire life around maintaining an appearance that's increasingly impossible to sustain." The confession seemed to cost her something in pride, yet also relieved her of a weight. "It's what we were taught," I acknowledged. "That our worth diminished with each line and gray hair." "Yes, but you found another way," she said with unexpected earnestness. "You're more vibrant, more compelling now than when I first met you 2 years ago. And it has nothing to do with appearances." The conversation shifted to her charity work, to Emma and Michael's amicable separation, to my upcoming trip to Barcelona. As we prepared to leave, Regina hesitated again. "Barbara, I know we started on the wrong foot. My comment about the wedding photos was inexcusable. But I wonder, might we start again? Perhaps lunch in January before you leave for Spain." The request contained no artifice, no social maneuvering, just simple human connection. "I'd like that," I replied, meaning it. That evening, I spoke with Emma about my decision to spend 3 months in Barcelona with Robert. Her enthusiasm warmed me, as did her lack of surprise. "Of course you should go," she said as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You've earned this adventure, Mom. And honestly, it's inspiring to see you embracing possibilities instead of limitations." "It feels right," I admitted. "Frightening but right. The best decisions often do," she replied with a wisdom that made me wonder when exactly my daughter had become so insightful. As Christmas approached, I received an unexpected call from Caroline, the marketing employee who had provided crucial evidence for my case against the bank. Since the settlement, she had moved to a smaller financial institution, where she'd recently been promoted to marketing director. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "not just for the case, but for showing me what's possible. I'm 41 now. Before watching you stand your ground, I was already dreading the next decade, already internalizing the message that my professional value had an expiration date. And now," I asked, curious, "now I'm developing a campaign specifically targeting women over 50 who control significant financial assets but are often ignored by financial services marketing." Her voice held evident pride. "My male colleagues thought it was a waste of resources, until I showed them the market research on female economic power. We launch next quarter." These conversations with Caroline, with Regina, with the women from the charity luncheon reinforced what had become increasingly clear over the past year. My personal stand against invisibility had resonance beyond my individual circumstances. By refusing to accept erasure, I had somehow created space for other women to question their own acceptance of diminishment. New Year's Eve found me at Robert's home, a small gathering of his friends and family merging with several of mine, including Emma and Daniel. As midnight approached, Robert raised his glass in a toast. "Two new beginnings at every age," he said, his eyes finding mine across the room. "And to the wisdom of embracing exactly where we are in life's journey." The sentiment echoed in my chest as we counted down the final seconds of a year that had transformed me from a woman accepting gradual erasure to one claiming her full presence in the world. As cheers erupted at midnight, Robert made his way to my side. "Happy New Year, Barbara," he said, taking my hand. "I have a feeling it's going to be an extraordinary one." "It already is," I replied, meeting his kiss without self-consciousness about the celebrating crowd around us, without concern for how a woman my age should behave, without any of the limiting beliefs that had constrained me for decades. January brought final preparations for Barcelona. Emma helped me select a wardrobe suitable for Spanish winter transitioning to spring, insisting on items more vibrant and stylish than my previous conservative choices. Patricia arranged for my consulting work to continue remotely, with video conferences scheduled around the time difference. "You've started something important," she told me during our farewell lunch. "These corporations actually listen to you now. Don't underestimate the impact you're having on workplace policies." The afternoon before my departure, I visited my neighborhood salon for a trim. The stylist, Marta, who had been cutting my hair for nearly a decade, studied me in the mirror. "You want something different today," she said, more observation than question. "Do I?" I asked, surprised by her perception. "Your eyes, your energy, they don't match this conservative style anymore," she explained, gesturing to my shoulder-length cut. "You've changed. Your hair should reflect that." The suggestion would have terrified me a year earlier. Any deviation from safe, age-appropriate styling seemed like asking for criticism. Now, I felt only curiosity. "What do you suggest?" Marta's eyes lit with professional enthusiasm. "Something with more movement, more personality. Not younger, that's not what I mean, but more authentic to who you've become." 90 minutes later, I emerged with a stylish, confident cut that framed my face beautifully while making no attempt to hide my age. The silver strands caught the light, integrated purposefully into the style rather than something to be disguised. Looking in the mirror, I saw not a woman trying to recapture youth, but one fully inhabiting her present self. My flight to Barcelona departed the following evening. Emma and Daniel drove me to the airport, helping with luggage and offering last-minute travel tips. As we approached security, Emma embraced me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she whispered. "For everything, but especially for this, for embracing adventure instead of safety." "I learned from watching you," I replied, holding her face between my hands. "Your courage in calling off the wedding when you recognized it wasn't right. Your willingness to start again." She smiled, eyes bright with unshed tears. "We learned from each other, I think." Robert was already in Barcelona, having departed a week earlier to set up the apartment and begin initial project meetings. As the plane lifted off American soil, I felt a curious mixture of exhilaration and peace. At 54, I was embarking on an adventure that would have seemed unimaginable to me at 44, not because of physical limitations or capability, but because of self-imposed boundaries about what was appropriate, expected, possible for a woman my age. The Barcelona apartment Robert had secured overlooked a tree-lined boulevard in the I-Example district. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating wooden floors and walls adorned with local artwork. It felt like a space designed for this specific chapter, neither a youthful first apartment nor a settled, cautious latter life residence, but something vibrant and full of possibility. "It's perfect," I told Robert as he showed me through the rooms. "I can already imagine writing here, looking out at the city." "I hoped you'd love it," he replied, clearly pleased. "There's a spare bedroom set up as an office for you, with good internet for your video conferences." That first evening, we walked the neighborhood, absorbing the rhythm of Barcelona life. Families strolled together. Older couples sat at outdoor cafes despite the January chill. Children played in small parks. Age seemed less segregated here. Generations mixing naturally in public spaces, rather than relegated to separate spheres. I noticed something different. I commented as we sat with espresso at a corner cafe. The older women here, they seem more visible, more integrated into public life. Robert nodded thoughtfully. There's less worship of youth for women. I think experience carries more respect. Not perfectly, no culture gets this entirely right, but differently than in the States. Over the following weeks, I established a new routine. Mornings writing at the apartment or a nearby cafe, afternoons exploring the city, or conducting video consultations with American corporations, evenings with Robert discussing his project or discovering local restaurants. I began studying Spanish, stumbling through conversations with patient shopkeepers and neighbors who appreciated the effort more than perfection. The change of environment proved unexpectedly liberating. Away from familiar contexts and expectations, I found myself experimenting more boldly with self-expression, wearing colors and styles I'd previously deemed too young or too attention-seeking, speaking more directly in professional consultations, moving through the world with greater confidence. 1 month into our stay, I received an email from a major American women's magazine requesting an interview for a feature on age discrimination and professional reinvention. The accompanying note explained that my case and subsequent advocacy had sparked important conversations about valuing experience in the workplace. As I considered the request, I realized how much my perspective had evolved since that devastating day in the bridal salon. The woman who had absorbed Regina's cruel words in silent shame could never have imagined becoming a voice for refusing erasure. The bank manager who had signed termination papers without protest could never have envisioned consulting with corporations on age-inclusive policies. I agreed to the interview, suggesting we conduct it via video from Barcelona, itself a statement about redefining what life after 50 could encompass. When the article appeared 2 months later, the accompanying photo showed me on our apartment balcony, the Barcelona cityscape behind me, my face unapologetically displaying 54 years of living. The headline read, "The Woman Who Refused to Disappear. How Barbara Winters is Changing the Conversation About Aging in America." Emma sent me the link with a message. "You look magnificent. Not despite your age but because of it. This is what I want to look like at 54, fully, gloriously present." Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling throughout my time in Barcelona, that the freedom I'd found wasn't about denying age, but about embracing it fully, claiming all the wisdom, confidence, and perspective that came with 5 decades of living. The tragedy wasn't in growing older, it was in accepting the cultural lie that aging diminished a woman's value, voice, and visibility. As April blossomed in Barcelona, bringing almond trees into flower and warming the Mediterranean air, Robert and I settled into a comfortable rhythm together. His project progressed well, with local officials praising his approach to integrated senior living that refused to isolate older residents from community life. My consulting work expanded to include European corporations interested in addressing their own age discrimination issues, and I began outlining a book about workplace ageism and strategies for combating it. One evening, as we shared dinner on our balcony, Robert reached for my hand across the table. "I've been thinking," he began, his expression thoughtful. "My project here ends in July, but there's another opportunity in Copenhagen, starting in September, and after that, possibly Rome." I waited, sensing there was more to this than information about his professional schedule. "What would you think about making this arrangement more permanent?" He continued carefully. "Not necessarily living together full-time. We both value our independent spaces, but intentionally sharing our lives and travels, planning around each other's work and interests." The proposal was as unconventional as it was perfect for who we were at this stage of life, not 20-somethings merging identities and building from scratch, but established individuals choosing to intertwine distinct, already meaningful lives. "I'd like that very much," I replied, the simplicity of my answer matching the straightforward honesty of his question. His smile deepened the lines around his eyes, lines I found increasingly attractive for the evidence they provided of a life fully lived. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent the rest of the evening discussing possibilities, maintaining our separate homes in Boston as anchors while creating this more fluid, adventure-oriented shared life. Neither of us felt compelled to formalize the arrangement with marriage or conventional labels. At our age, we had both learned that authentic commitment resided in daily choices rather than ceremonial declarations. The following weekend, Emma and Daniel visited, having arranged a European trip that coincidentally, or perhaps not, included Barcelona. Showing them our favorite discoveries, the hidden courtyard cafes, the architectural wonders, the neighborhood markets. I was struck by how easily they accepted this new chapter in my life. "You seem so at home here, Mom," Emma observed as we strolled through Park Güell, Gaudy's fantastical creation overlooking the city. "I don't think I've ever seen you this relaxed, this present." "I feel that way," I admitted. "There's something liberating about starting fresh in a new place at my age. All the shoulds and expectations fall away. I'm just Barbara here, not someone's mother or former employee or neighbor, just myself." "You're still my mother," Emma pointed out with a smile, "but a mother who's showing me what's possible at every stage of life. Do you know how rare and valuable that is?" On their final evening, over dinner at our apartment, Daniel raised his glass in a toast. "To Barbara, who reminds us all that life's most exciting chapters can begin at any age." Emma joined the toast, adding, "And to never ever accepting invisibility when someone suggests your face might ruin anything." We all laughed. The painful memory of Regina's comment now transformed into something we could reference with humor rather than hurt. Time and perspective had alchemized that moment of humiliation into the catalyst for profound change, not just for me, but for Emma, for the women who contacted me after speaking engagements, for the corporations revising policies based on my consultations. As spring blossomed into early summer, I received an unexpected invitation to deliver a keynote address at a major international conference on workplace equity being held in Madrid in June. The timing was perfect, allowing me to travel by train from Barcelona for the two-day event. Preparing my presentation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. From the bank manager who had accepted gradual erasure as an inevitable consequence of aging to the woman now addressing global business leaders about valuing experience. From the mother who had absorbed Regina's cruelty in silent shame to the advocate whose story was changing corporate policies. The Madrid Conference Center hummed with energy as attendees from across Europe, Asia, and the Americas gathered to discuss evolving workplace practices. My session on age discrimination and the economic cost of discarding experienced employees was scheduled as the closing keynote of the first day. As I took the stage, surveying the audience of nearly 500 HR executives, policy experts, and corporate leaders, I felt none of the self-consciousness that would have plagued me a year earlier. No concern about whether I looked too old for the platform. No apology in my posture or presentation. Just the calm confidence of a woman who knew her value was not diminished by the years evident on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I stand before you as the face of experience, the very quality our workplaces claim to value while systematically discarding it when packaged in bodies over 50 today. I want to challenge you to recognize the profound disconnect between stated corporate values and practiced corporate behaviors when it comes to aging in the workplace." For the next 45 minutes, I shared research on age discrimination costs, provided case studies of companies benefiting from intergenerational workforces, and outlined specific policy recommendations. I concluded with my own story, not as an emotional appeal, but as concrete illustration of systemic issues. The woman who was told her face would ruin her daughter's wedding photos, and the bank manager who was discarded after 29 exemplary years are the same person. Me, I told them. The message in both cases was identical. Your experience, your knowledge, your very presence has become inconvenient. Please disappear quietly. The room had grown completely silent, hundreds of professionals hanging on every word. I stand before you today because I refused that invitation to invisibility. I rejected the idea that my value diminished with each passing year, and in doing so, I discovered that the problem was never my age. It was a cultural paradigm that systematically devalues the very experience it claims to respect. As I concluded to enthusiastic applause, I felt a profound sense of having come full circle. The painful rejections that had initially shattered my sense of worth had ultimately led to this moment of powerful advocacy. By refusing erasure in my personal life, I had somehow found myself addressing its systemic manifestations on an international stage. The question period that followed revealed how deeply my message had resonated. Executives from major corporations sought specific guidance on policy revisions. HR directors confessed their own unconscious biases in hiring decisions. A Swedish banking executive publicly committed to auditing her institutions' employment practices for age-related disparities. That evening, at the conference reception, I found myself surrounded by attendees eager to continue the conversation. A woman perhaps in her mid-40s approached during a brief lull. "Ms. Winters, your presentation was transformative," she said, introducing herself as the HR director for a major French technology company. "But I have a more personal question, if you don't mind." "Not at all," I replied. "How did you find the courage?" she asked, lowering her voice slightly. "I'm 46, already feeling the subtle shifts in how I'm perceived professionally. Already hearing comments about keeping up with technology despite my technical background. I find myself buying more expensive creams, considering procedures, worrying about becoming irrelevant. How did you move past that fear to this confidence?" Her vulnerability touched me deeply. "I wish I could tell you it was an immediate transformation," I said honestly. "It wasn't. It began with rage at being dismissed, at being erased, but evolved into something more powerful. I realized that by accepting invisibility, I was validating the very paradigm that diminished me." She nodded, clearly relating to the experience. "The real courage," I continued, "came in recognizing that I had a choice. I could continue contorting myself to fit impossible standards, or I could challenge the standards themselves. I could accept progressive erasure as inevitable, or I could claim my right to remain fully visible, fully valuable, fully present in every space I enter." "And now," she asked, "the comments, the subtle dismissals, they don't affect you." "They affect me," I acknowledged, "but they no longer define me. That's the difference." As I returned to Barcelona the following day, I reflected on that conversation and the dozens of others like it that had followed my presentation. Women approaching or past 50, quietly terrified of becoming irrelevant. Men concerned about being pushed out of careers they loved based on birth year rather than capability. Young professionals wondering how to create more age-inclusive environments. Robert met me at the train station, his warm embrace a welcome homecoming after the intensity of the conference. As we walked arm in arm through the Barcelona evening, I shared the highlights of the event. "You've found your calling," he observed as we settled at a favorite outdoor cafe. "Not just fighting against discrimination, but helping people reimagine what aging can be." "I suppose I have," I agreed, surprising myself with the recognition. "Though I never could have predicted this path a year ago. The best journeys are rarely those we plan," he replied, his eyes crinkling with the smile I'd grown to love, "but rather the ones we have the courage to embrace when unexpected doors open." That night, I dreamed of the bridal salon where this journey had begun, the moment when Regina's cruel words had crystallized a lifetime of subtle erasures. In the dream, however, I didn't absorb the hurt in silence. Instead, I stood tall and said simply, "No, I will not disappear for your comfort." I woke feeling profoundly peaceful, recognizing that while I hadn't actually spoken those words in the bridal salon, I had been living them every day since. With each speaking engagement, each consulting session, each instance of claiming space without apology for my age or appearance, I was declaring my refusal to disappear. As our Barcelona sojourn approached its final weeks, Robert and I finalized plans for the coming months. My return to Boston in August to work on my book and fulfill speaking commitments. his project in Copenhagen beginning in September where I would join him for extended visits, a holiday gathering in Boston with our combined families in December. Emma called regularly, updating me on developments in her life, a promotion at work, her deepening relationship with Daniel, her own growing advocacy around ageist messaging and marketing campaigns. "You've started something, Mom," she told me during one call, "not just for yourself, but for all of us. For every woman who dreaded turning 40, 50, 60, because we're taught those milestones represent diminishment rather than accumulation." Her words stayed with me as I prepared to leave Barcelona, this beautiful city that had hosted such a transformative chapter in my life. On our final evening, Robert and I walked to a lookout point offering panoramic views of the city as sunset painted the Mediterranean gold and crimson. "When we arrived in January, did you imagine how much would change in 6 months?" Robert asked as we watched the city lights begin to twinkle below us. "Not remotely," I admitted. "I thought I was coming for an adventure, a brief departure from my regular life. I didn't expect to find a new purpose, a new voice, and a new relationship model," he added with a smile, squeezing my hand. "Not many couples our age would consider this transatlantic arrangement. Not many couples our age allow themselves to imagine new possibilities," I replied. "We're expected to settle into predictable patterns, to shrink our worlds rather than expand them." The setting sun cast long shadows across the city below, a beautiful interplay of light and darkness that seemed an apt metaphor for the journey of the past year. The painful rejections had ultimately illuminated a path toward greater authenticity, toward refusing the cultural expectation that aging, particularly for women, meant gradual disappearance from meaningful participation in the world. As darkness settled fully over Barcelona, stars appearing in the velvet sky above, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, devastated by Regina's cruel words, shattered by my termination, uncertain of my value or place in the world. I wished I could reach back through time to assure her that the painful rejections she was experiencing would ultimately lead to profound liberation. That the words "she ruined everything with that old face" would become not a sentence of erasure, but the catalyst for claiming her rightful, visible space in the world. That at 54, she would discover not diminishment but expansion, not invisibility but powerful presence, not an ending but a magnificent beginning. Standing beside Robert, looking out over the city that had hosted this transformation, I silently thanked the woman I had been with all her uncertainty and pain, for finding the courage to take that first step toward refusing erasure, for recognizing, finally, that the face marked by 54 years of living was not something to apologize for, but something to present to the world with pride. That old face had earned every line, every silver strand, every evidence of experience etched upon it. And far from ruining anything, it had become the authentic signature of a woman who had discovered, at precisely the age she was told to disappear, that her most powerful, visible, and valuable chapters were just beginning.